The letter from the Earl of Dunmore arrived on a Wednesday, which was, in Phoebe Calder's experience, the worst day of the week for complicated things. Mondays you were prepared for, Fridays you could weather. Wednesdays arrived in the middle of everything and demanded attention at precisely the moment you had none to spare. She read it at her desk, in the small office she rented above the apothecary in Bath, between 2 client appointments and a third that had cancelled without warning. With the focused attention she brought to anything that was going to require a decision. The letter was from the Earl's secretary, not the Earl himself, which was either a sign of efficiency or a sign that the Earl did not write his own correspondence. And she had not yet determined which. It offered her the position of estate manager at Dunmore Hall, Wiltshire, at a salary that was. She read the number twice, considerably more than she was currently earning, which was itself more than most women in her position earned, which meant the number was significant. The estate, the letter said, had been under the management of Mr. Gerald Hartley for 11 years. Mr. Hartley had recently retired. The Earl was seeking someone with demonstrable experience in estate accounts, tenant management and agricultural planning. She had all 3. She had them because she had spent 8 years building a practice in Bath that managed the financial affairs of 6 estates, 4 households, and 1 bewildered baronet who had inherited money he did not understand, and had been very relieved to find someone who did. She also had them because she was her father's daughter, and her father had been a land agent for 30 years, and she had been following him around fields and ledgers since she was 9. She wrote back and said she was interested and would like to know more about the position before making a decision. The reply came from the Earl himself. It said, "The position involves full management of the Dunmore estate. I understand you come highly recommended. I should tell you, in the interest of honesty, that the estate has had some difficulties and that I am looking for someone who can address them. I should also tell you that the previous manager was in post for 11 years and that some of what he left behind is not straightforward. If you are still interested, I would like to meet." She was still interested. She wrote, "I am available Thursday." He wrote Thursday at 11. She arrived at 11. What happened in the following 40 minutes would be, she reflected afterward, one of the more interesting conversations she had had in 8 years of professional life. It would also be the beginning of something she had not planned for. But that came later. First, the 40 minutes. Dunmore Hall was larger than she had expected, and in worse condition than the letter had implied, which told her something about the Earl before she had met him. Either he did not know the extent of the problem, or he had chosen to present it conservatively, and she would find out which within the first 10 minutes. She was shown to the study by a butler who had the slightly strained quality of a man managing a household that was under-resourced and knew it. The study itself was fine, well furnished, books on the shelves, a desk that had been used and not merely displayed, but the window wanted resealing, and the carpet had a worn patch near the door that had been there long enough to suggest it had been noticed and not addressed. She catalogued these things automatically, the way she catalogued everything. The Earl came in 4 minutes after she arrived, which was either a sign that he had been nearby or a sign that he had timed his entrance, and she had not yet determined which. He was perhaps 38, dark-haired, with the contained, direct quality of someone who had learned to take up the right amount of space. Not too much, not too little. His face was the face of a man who had been managing something difficult for long enough that the managing had become simply the shape of things. He looked at her with the frank, assessing attention of someone who had heard good things and was determining whether the good things were accurate. She looked back with the same attention. "Miss Calder," he said, "thank you for coming. Lord Dunmore." She did not sit until he gestured. She sat then, with the composed economy of someone who did not waste movement. "Tell me about the estate." He sat across from her and told her. He told it with the specific, controlled quality of a man who had been briefed on what to say and was now deciding how much of what he actually knew to include. She listened with the focused attention she gave client presentations, which was the attention of someone noting not just what was said, but what was being carefully not said. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "The accounts," she said. "The last 3 years, he produced them." She opened the first ledger and looked at it for approximately 90 seconds. "Your previous manager," she said without looking up, "was not stealing. I want you to know that before I say the rest of it." He was very still. "The rest of it. He was not stealing," she said again, turning a page. "But he was not managing either. He was maintaining. There is a difference. Maintaining means keeping things from getting dramatically worse. Managing means making them better. 11 years of maintaining has produced an estate that is structurally sound and entirely stagnant." She closed the ledger and looked at him. "The tenant rental income has not increased in 6 years. The North Field has been underutilised for at least 4. The drainage issue in the east, which I could see from the road on the way here, has been noted in these accounts twice and addressed neither time." She paused. "The estate is not in crisis. It is in the condition of something that has been very carefully not improved for a long time." He looked at her. She looked at him. "You read 3 years of accounts in 90 seconds, he said. "I read the first year thoroughly. The second and third confirmed the pattern." She set the ledger on the desk between them. "You said in your letter that you were looking for someone who could address the difficulties. Those are not the difficulties. The difficulties are the consequence of the real problem, which is that the estate has not been managed. It has been supervised." He was quiet for a moment. "Miss Calder," he said, "I want to be honest with you about something. Please. I had 3 other candidates for this position before I contacted you. 2 of them came to this meeting and saw the accounts and told me the estate was in good shape and that they would be happy to continue in the same direction." A pause. "One of them told me the previous manager had done excellent work." She looked at the ledger. "The previous manager did consistent work. Excellent is a different standard." "Yes," he looked at her steadily. "The third candidate declined after seeing the accounts. She said the position was beneath her experience." Phoebe looked at him. Something settled in her expression, the specific quality of someone arriving at a conclusion. "The position," she said carefully, "is not beneath anyone's experience. It is, in fact, a significant undertaking that will require considerable skill to address properly." She paused. "What is beneath a competent person's standards is not the position. It is the condition of the estate as received." He held her gaze for a moment. "Yes," he said quietly, "that is exactly the distinction." "They are different things," she said. "One is about the role. The other is about the work that needs to be done in it. I am not interested in positions that do not require my full capability. This one does." Something shifted in his expression. Something that had been assessing becoming something that had concluded. "The salary in the letter," he said, "is adequate. I can improve it." "Improve it after 6 months," she said, "when you have evidence that the improvement is warranted. I am not going to negotiate on the basis of what I think I am worth. I am going to demonstrate what I am worth and negotiate on the basis of that." He looked at her. She looked at him. He said, "When can you start?" she said. "I have 3 clients to transition. 4 weeks." He said. 3. She looked at him. He said, 3 weeks. "I will send someone to Bath to assist with the transition." She considered this. "Fine," she said. 3 weeks. "I want full access to everything from day one. All accounts, all correspondence with tenants, all records going back to the beginning of the previous manager's tenure. You will have it. And I want it understood that my recommendations are implemented unless you have a specific objection with a specific reason, not a general preference. A reason." He looked at her steadily. "Agreed." "And," she said, standing, because the meeting was concluded, and there was no point in prolonging it, "the drainage in the East Field needs to be addressed before winter. I would like to arrange a site visit in the 2nd week. Is that possible?" He stood. "I will be available." "Good." She picked up her coat. "Lord Dunmore, Miss Calder, the previous manager," she said, at the door. He was not a bad manager. He was a manager who had been allowed to stay too long in a comfortable arrangement without being asked to improve it. That is not entirely his failure. He held her gaze. She left. She walked down the drive of Dunmore Hall in the October afternoon and thought about the East Field drainage and the underutilised North Field and the six years of stagnant rental income. And she thought, 3 weeks, then we begin. She did not think about the way he had looked at her when she said, "The position is not beneath anyone's experience." She thought about it on the drive home. She was still thinking about it when she arrived in Bath. She told herself it was professional interest in a new client. She was not entirely convincing. She arrived at Dunmore Hall on a Monday in November with 2 trunks, a set of her own ledgers, and a list of 47 things she intended to address in the first 30 days. The list was not public. It was a working document, the private architecture of her approach, the scaffolding she built before the building, which she had learned over 8 years to keep to herself until the scaffolding was no longer needed and the building could speak for itself. She began with the accounts. Not because the accounts were the most urgent thing. They were not. The drainage was the most urgent thing, and the tenant situation in the North Field was the second most urgent, and the roof of the East storage barn, which she had noticed on the drive in, was the third. But the accounts were the foundation, and you did not build on a foundation you had not fully examined. And she needed 14 days with the full records before she would understand what she was actually working with. She worked in the estate office, which was hers from the first day. He had cleared it, which she noted with approval, and had arranged for the full records, going back 11 years, to be waiting for her, which she noted with more approval. A man who said he would provide something, and provided it before she arrived, was either very organised or had understood that she would check. She suspected both. He came to the estate office on the 3rd day. Not to supervise. She had made the terms clear on the terms of supervision, and he had agreed to them, and she had already revised her estimate of him upward, based on the fact that he had not sent anyone to observe her on the 1st or 2nd day, which lesser employers sometimes did under the guise of assistance. He came to the estate office on the 3rd day and knocked, which she also noted, because it was her office, and knocking was correct. "The North Field," he said. "I wanted to ask about the North Field before you got to it." She looked up from the 1809 ledger. "I have already looked at the North Field." He came in and sat down across from her, which was becoming, she noticed, his habit, the sitting across, the direct attention, the waiting. He was good at waiting. "And?" he said. "The field has been used for the same crop rotation for 9 years, she said. "The rotation is fine for maintenance, but it is not optimizing the soil. Switching to a 4-year rotation with clover in the 3rd year would improve yield within 2 seasons and improve the soil composition over high fat. She paused. I need to speak to the tenant before I recommend it formally. It is his field. He should be part of the decision. He looked at her. Most managers would present the recommendation and implement it. Most managers do not have to live with the tenant's opinion of them afterward. She turned a page. The tenant has been on that field for 14 years. He knows things about it that I do not yet know. I want to know them before I recommend anything. He was quiet for a moment. I will introduce you to Hargreave this week, he said. He has strong opinions. Good, she said. Strong opinions mean someone has been paying attention. He almost smiled at that, almost. She went back to the ledger. He stayed for 20 minutes, which she had not invited and did not object to, and in those 20 minutes she asked him 4 questions about the estate history that were not in the records, and that he answered with the specific, grounded knowledge of someone who had grown up on the land and knew it from the inside rather than the documents. The answers were useful. She noted them. On the Friday of the first week, she submitted her preliminary assessment. Not 47 items, 5. The 5 that needed to begin in order for everything else to be possible. The drainage, the Northfield consultation, the storage barn roof, the renegotiation of 2 tenant agreements that had not been reviewed since 2009 and were significantly below market rate, and the household accounts, which were separate from the estate accounts and which had been maintained by a system she was going to rebuild from the foundation. He read the 5 items on Friday afternoon and sent back a note that said, "Proceed on all 5. The tenant agreements. I want to be present for those conversations." She wrote back, "Of course. Tuesday at 10 for Hargreave." He wrote back, "Tuesday at 10. She went to the tenant meeting with him on Tuesday at 10. He was, she found, better at the tenant meeting than she had expected. Not in the polished, managed way of a landlord, performing his role, but in the genuine way of someone who knew the people on his land and was known by them in return. Hargreave, the Northfield tenant, broad and weathered and possessed of the strong opinions she had been promised, spoke to the Earl with the comfortable directness of a man who had been speaking directly to this particular landlord for 15 years, and had established the right to do so. He was also, she discovered, entirely right about the Northfield. She revised her rotation recommendation on the drive back. She told the Earl she had revised it. He said, "Hargreave is usually right about that field," she said. "Then he should have been consulted 11 years ago," he said quietly. "Yes, he should have been." She looked at him. He looked at the road. Something in the quality of the silence told her that this was a conclusion he had arrived at and was not comfortable with, and that the discomfort was genuine. She said nothing. But she noted it. She noted a great many things about the Earl of Dunmore in the first month. In the methodical, honest way, she noted everything. She noted that he was in the estate office on most mornings by 8, which meant he was working and not managing the appearance of working. She noted that when she submitted a recommendation and he had an objection, the objection was always specific and usually correct, and that he said so when it was not. She noted that he had not once, in 4 weeks, asked her to do something a different way, because it was the way it had always been done. She noted that he looked at her work with the genuine attention of someone who found it worth looking at, not the performed attention of someone who understood that looking was expected. She noted, in the private accounting, that she kept most carefully, that she was looking forward to the Tuesday morning meetings in a way that was not entirely professional. She addressed this with the brisk practicality she brought to problems she did not want. She was not entirely successful. The conversation happened on a Thursday in December, which was not planned by either of them, and which arrived out of a Tuesday meeting that had run long, and a Wednesday site visit that had run longer, and a Thursday morning in which they were both in the estate office at 8 o'clock, reviewing the drainage project report, and something shifted, not dramatically. She had said something about the east field gradient, and he had said something back that was wrong, and she had corrected him. Not mid-sentence, but close. And he had looked at her with the expression that had been developing over 6 weeks, and that she had been carefully not examining directly. She examined it directly. She said, without looking up from the drainage report, "You are going to say something." He was quiet for a moment. "I have been deciding," he said, "whether to say it. Decide. It is outside the professional scope. I am aware." She set down the report. "Say it anyway." He looked at her across the desk, the full, direct attention that was simply how he looked at things he was serious about, and that she had catalogued over 6 weeks with the focused honesty of someone who knew what she was looking at, and was trying not to look too long. "I hired you," he said, "because you told me the position was not beneath your experience, but the previous management had been beneath the position." "I remember." "I hired you because no one in 4 interviews had said anything that was true," he said. "You said the true thing in the first minute, and I thought, that is the person I need." She looked at him. "And after 6 weeks," he said, "I find that I need the person for reasons that are not entirely professional." The estate office was quiet around them. Outside, the December morning was doing what December mornings did. Grey and cold, and pressing against the windows. She said, "I have been managing a similar recognition for approximately 4 weeks." He was still. "Managing it," he said, attempting to. She looked at the drainage report. "I am not, it turns out, as good at managing it as I am at managing the east field." Something happened at the corner of his mouth. She said, "I want to say something." "Say it." "I have been in professional positions for 8 years," she said, "and I have developed clear views about the separation of professional and personal. The separation exists for good reasons, and I am not going to pretend otherwise." "No," he agreed, "but the separation," she said, "is also sometimes used as a reason to manage things into silence that do not belong in silence." She looked at him directly. "I corrected you in the first meeting because I had a policy of not managing things into silence that were true. I intend to maintain the policy." He looked at her. "What is the true thing?" he said. She said, "That I find this work the most interesting I have done in 8 years. That the reasons include the estate, which is genuinely interesting, and also include the person I am doing it with, which is a separate and more complicated observation," he said. "Complicated how?" she said. "Complicated in the way that anything is complicated when it is real, and you have not planned for it, and you are not certain what to do with it." He was quiet. She waited. He said, "I have been not planning for it since the first meeting," she said. "Since the first meeting," he said. "Since you said the position is fine. It is the previous management that was beneath it." He paused. "I had heard that exact thing said in the other direction. People protecting incompetent predecessors, arguing the work was beneath them, when the truth was they were beneath the work. And you reversed it in one sentence, and I thought..." He stopped. "What?" she said. "I thought, that is someone who understands the difference between a role and the person in it. And someone who understands that difference is someone I want in every conversation I have for the foreseeable future." She looked at the desk between them, the drainage report, The 6 weeks of ledgers and tenant meetings and estate office mornings and Tuesday meetings that ran long. She said, "What are you proposing?" He said, "Not yet. I am working toward proposing. At present I am describing the state of things." She almost smiled. "Describe accurately," he said. "I am describing a state in which I have been in the presence of the most capable and most direct person I have encountered in my adult life for 6 weeks, and in which I have spent approximately half of those 6 weeks trying to determine the appropriate professional distance, and in which I have concluded that the professional distance is correct for the work and insufficient for everything else." She said, "And everything else," he said, "requires a different conversation when you are ready for it." She looked at him. He looked back with the steady, honest attention that she had been cataloguing for 6 weeks and had stopped pretending was only professionally interesting somewhere around week 4. She said, "I need to finish the drainage report," he said. "I know," she said, "and submit the Northfield recommendation," he said. "Yes," she said, "and address the storage barn before the January rains," he said. "All of that," she said. "After the storage barn," he said. "After the storage barn." She picked up the drainage report. He stood at the door. He paused. She said without looking up, "The drainage report will be done by Friday," he said. "The storage barn by the following Thursday," she said. "Then Friday the week after," he said. "I will be available." He left. She set down the drainage report. She thought, "I corrected him in the first minute, and he hired me, and now it is December, and I am going to have a different conversation on a Friday in 2 weeks, and I did not plan for any of this," she thought. The best things are generally not the ones you plan for. She picked up the report. She finished it by Friday. The storage barn was addressed by the following Thursday. The conversation happened on the Friday the week after. It went, as conversations between two direct people who had both stopped managing things into silence tended to go, exactly as it should. The conversation on Friday produced, among other things, the clearest proposal Phoebe Calder had ever received or heard described. He said, "I want to ask you to marry me. I am not asking you today because today is 2 weeks after I described the state of things, and I think 2 weeks is too soon. I am telling you that I intend to ask, so that you have time to consider it, and so that you are not surprised when I do," she said. "When do you intend to ask?" he said. "When the storage barn situation is fully resolved," she said. "The storage barn situation will be resolved by February," he said. "February then," she said. "That is a very specific timeline for a proposal," he said. "I have found that specific timelines produce better outcomes than vague ones," she said. "That is true of estate management," he said. "It appears to be true of other things as well." She looked at him across the estate office. The Friday afternoon light coming pale through the window, the drainage report filed, the December estate settling into the quiet of a property that was, after 6 weeks, beginning to run differently than it had. She said, "I appreciate the notice," he said. "I thought you would," she said. "February is 8 weeks," he said. "8 weeks," she said. "I will have formed a view by February," he said. "I expected you would have formed one already." She looked at him. He looked back. She said, "The view I have formed already and the answer I will give in February are related but not identical. The view is formed. The answer requires the 8 weeks," he said. "What happens in the 8 weeks?" she said. "I find out if the state of things holds," he said. "It will hold," she said. "You sound very certain," he said. "I am certain about the things I have examined thoroughly." "I have been examining this for 6 weeks," she said. "I have been examining it for 4, he said. "You started later," she said. "I had a drainage project," He almost smiled. She went back to the ledger she had been reviewing. He went back to the correspondence he had brought in. They worked in the estate office until the light went, which was what they had been doing for 6 weeks, and the doing of it had the quality it always had. The comfortable, purposeful quality of two people who were both working and both aware of each other, and had reached, somewhere around week 3, a state of ease with the awareness. He left at 5. She stayed until 6, which was her habit. She walked to the window when he had gone and looked at the December estate. The east field, where the drainage was now running correctly, the north field, where the consultation with Hargreave had produced a better rotation than she had designed herself, the storage barn roof that would be addressed in January and resolved in February. She thought, 8 weeks. She thought, the view is already formed. She thought, the answer is going to be yes. And I have known it was going to be yes since approximately week 4, and the 8 weeks are not about forming the answer. She thought, the 8 weeks are about being certain that he is what he appears to be, that a man who hired someone who corrected him mid-sentence and agreed to full access and attended tenant meetings and had a specific objection, with a specific reason, is the same man in February that he is in December, she thought. In my experience, people who are what they appear to be in December are also what they appear to be in February, she thought. He is going to be what he appears to be in February, she thought. Good. She turned from the window. She picked up the ledger she had been reviewing. She finished it before she went to bed. 8 weeks was 8 weeks. She was going to spend it managing the estate. The answer would keep until February. It did. The North Field produced its best yield in a decade in the first summer after the rotation change. Hargreave came to tell her himself, which was either a sign that he felt the information was primarily hers or a sign that he had decided she was the person to tell things to. She suspected both. He arrived at the estate office on a Tuesday morning in August, with the contained satisfaction of a man whose opinion had been vindicated, and said, "The clover did what you said it would do." She said, "What we said it would do. You told me about the 3rd-year drainage in the 2nd field." He looked at her for a moment with the assessing quality he had brought to every interaction since November. He said, "You're all right, you are," she said. "Thank you, Hargreave." He left. She wrote it in the estate journal under August. North Field yield significantly improved. Rotation confirmed. Tenant consultation model to be applied across all agricultural holdings. She had been writing the estate journal since December. Not the official accounts. Those had their own system. The system she had rebuilt from the foundation in the first 3 months. The journal was different. The record of what was tried and why and what the result was. The institutional memory of a property that had been maintained for 11 years without one. James, who was the Earl of Dunmore, and also, since February, her husband, which the county had received with the specific bewildered approval of people who had expected something more conventional and had decided on reflection that this was better. Read the journal sometimes, not because she showed it to him, because she left it on the desk and he read things that were on the desk, which she had known about since November, and had chosen to regard as a form of transparency rather than a privacy violation. He came to the estate office on the Tuesday of Hargreave's visit and saw the August entry. He read it. He said, "Tenant consultation model to be applied across all agricultural holdings." She said, "Yes," he said. "All of them," she said. "All of them. It produces better results. Hargreave's rotation was better than mine," he said. "You already knew the rotation was better than yours. You told me in November," she said. I knew it was right. I needed the first season to confirm the mechanism, he said. And now you have confirmed it, she said. And now I have confirmed it. He sat in the chair across from her. His chair, the one he had been sitting in since the third day of the first week, the chair that had his shape in it now, in the specific way of a chair that has been sat in by the same person for long enough to know them. He said, the drainage, she said, fully resolved. The January rains were the test. We passed. He said, the storage barn. She said, structurally sound. The rental income renegotiations have produced a 14% increase in the first year. The North Field yield is up. The household accounts are running on the new system and will produce a clearer picture of the annual expenditure by October, he said. And the previous management, she looked at him. He was looking at her with the expression, the full, warm, unmanaged expression that had been developing since approximately week 3 and that she had been receiving since February, with the specific, steady quality of someone who had decided to receive it and was not going to stop. She said, the previous management was not the problem. The problem was the absence of a clear requirement to improve. He said, yes. She said, the requirement now exists. He said, it does. She said, the improvement is measurable. He said, it is. She looked at the estate journal. She thought about the letter that had arrived on a Wednesday in October and the meeting in November, and the thing she had said about the position and the previous management that had produced a specific expression on a man's face that she had not looked at directly until week 4. She thought the position was not beneath anyone. The position required everything she had. She had given it everything, and the everything had been worth it, and was going to keep being worth it. She thought, the state of things held. She thought, I told him it would hold, and it did. She thought, I am rarely wrong about the things I have examined thoroughly. She picked up the ledger. He went back to his correspondence. The estate office was quiet around them. Outside, the August estate was running, the North Field green and productive, the East Field draining correctly, the storage barn sound, the tenants consulted, the accounts rebuilt, the institutional memory being written down for the first time in 11 years so that whoever came after would not have to start from nothing. She was building something. She had been building something since November. She intended to keep building it. For a considerable time, the position was fine. It had always been fine. It was the previous management that had been beneath it. She had known that from the first day. She had been right. She was, it turned out, right about most things. Her husband had stopped being surprised by this sometime around April. She found this one of the more satisfying developments of the year.
If you believe that real love is not arranged but discovered, subscribe to Moonlight at Mayfair and return for the next story beneath the soft light of the evening star. Moonlight at Mayfair, where every love is hard won and every ending is deserved.